Hey guys, today I'm back in Besiege, and I've wanted to make a weapon for a long time now. I think I finally settled on a Gatling gun. Now, I'm not sure exactly how realistic this is gonna be, but I'm gonna make it shoot a lot of bullets. So, let's get right into it. So I'm just starting out in the sandbox, and the first thing I wanna do is just some simple tests with different things that shoot and see what works best. So you can see here I'm starting out normal cannon, hit shoot, it fires cannonball, it goes back. Seems simple enough. Next thing I wanna try out is the shrapnel cannon, and this one is a lot more punch. You can see I get thrown way further back, but the other thing is it only shoots a few feet in front of it, so the shrapnel shoots just wouldn't really be that great for a long-range Gatling gun. So the next thing I want to try here out is a bomb, and it itself isn't going to shoot, but if I put a vacuum block behind it and set it to a negative power, it'll push it forward, and you can see here I get a sort of shooting motion. Now I thought shooting bombs would be pretty neat, but the problem with bombs is that storing a lot of them in one place can get very bad. You can see here in my explosion-powered engine video, storing a lot of these bombs just frequently caused them to explode. So I didn't really want to deal with that since I'd probably need hundreds of these things stored next to each other. So the next thing I tried out was this crossbow, and you can see as it shoots, it's not that bad at all, but the problem with it is it doesn't really go that far, and also it just didn't really seem right. The arrows were a little small, and I was hoping to shoot something a little bit bigger. So lastly here, I wanted to try out this rocket, and you can see, hit a key, starts launching, but the problem with the rocket for me is it's not really like a bullet, it's more like a missile, which is also cool, but it's just not exactly what I'm going for here. So I decided the cannon is what I'm going to go with, and for just one last test, I wanted to put a flamethrower behind it and see how it would do. And you see here, when I turn on the flamethrower, the cannon shoots. And this is pretty big, because that means that I'm not going to need to have a separate key to control every single cannon. I can just heat up each cannon and then have it shoot. Now this method is a little unpredictable for how long it'll take the cannon to shoot, but at least it works. So this is what I want to run with for now. And with all this testing done, wanted to delete this entire rig and start out making the gun. So the first thing I'm doing here is just putting a rotating disc up a few blocks from the starting block. After that, I'm just using some wood blocks to make this square-like structure. After I have that in place, you'll see here what I'm doing is putting some cannons on the sides of it. Now, I'm gonna have infinite ammo on for these cannons, just temporarily to show you why I don't want to have it on, because once I have all these cannons in place, right behind them, I could put down the flamethrowers. You can see here, the cannons just keep shooting. Now, this looks cool, but the problem with it is that you'll see the cannonballs aren't actually going that far, and the other issue here is that it's kind of unrealistic for the cannons to have infinite cannonballs. So what I want to do is turn off infinite ammo for this, and just have each cannon shoot one cannonball, so I have to bring in the cannon, shoot my bullet, and then eject it out somehow. So my first plan on how to grab the cannons is using these grabbers. Now, if I get the grabbers near a cannon, they'll grab onto it, and hopefully I can spin it around, shoot it at some point in the rotation, and then eject it. So starting out here on the top, I'm building up some wood, and this is to hold in the cannons, so I'll be able to grab one at a time and fling them out. So after building up this box, just made sure to attach it to the mechanism so it wouldn't fall straight down. After I did that, you can see here I'm putting in the cannon. Now, the cannon actually needs to rotate so the attachment point is facing up, because otherwise it's going to grab onto the sides of the box. But you can see there, it actually falls down into the grabber. But I kind of messed this up, because I was supposed to have the box be free floating in the air, but instead it was sort of attached to everything else. So what I had to do is delete the connection and just pin it right in the air. Once I had this, you can see here I'm able to grab the cannon, box stays in the air, I'm able to shoot the cannon, and you can see here once it gets up around again, I'm able to eject it, and I should be able to grab another one. Now I actually noticed here if I put down a piston to expand out the grabber a little bit, as you see here, I'm going to be able to reach into a box. And you also notice that I'm moving the entire assembly down and over to the right. Now the reason I'm doing this is that all the cannons are horizontal, so they won't just fall straight out, and I won't need to come up with any weird mechanisms to hold them in place. But this is where I noticed some big problems with this design. And the biggest one is probably just that grabbing the cannon with these grabbers is really annoying to do. In fact, trying to get the right spot and then latching onto it means I'm probably gonna have to stop the rotation of this, which is really gonna slow down the fire rate. So I ended up completely scrapping that idea, and I had another one instead that I thought would work way better. So here what I'm doing is putting down some wood pieces on the ends of this very simple rotating structure, and these wood pieces are gonna be in an arc completely around the spinning structure, so that I'll be able to move the cannons inside of this arc and then eject them out at some point. You also noticed I'm deleting a small chunk of this wheel, and that's so that I can have the cannons get ejected out. Now also I put a couple wood blocks on the outside of this, and you can see as I rotate around, they sort of get hung up a little bit on the outside. Now they should just hover right below it, and you can see I'm putting in a smooth surface block now to do that job, and as it rotates around, it's just skimming the outside of this arc, and that's what I want to be seeing. And here I actually expanded it out quite a bit, and you can see I have two sets of these smooth surface blocks, and in between them I should be able to hold the cannon and keep it in place. So with that looking good, you can see what I'm doing is expanding out this arc so that it's able to hold the whole cannon. After that, putting the cannon in place like this. I have to spin it around so that it's not attached to anything, but once I do that, I can give it a test here, and you can see it gets pinned right in between the smooth surface blocks, but as I try to rotate it, it actually falls out of the mechanism. Interestingly enough though, it actually seems to perform better when I only have one set of smooth surface blocks and I'm purely pushing it. The cannon doesn't really seem like it likes to get pinned right in place, and this freer design seems to to work pretty well because I'm able to rotate it all the way around and eject it. So that looking good, you can see here I get some pretty high speeds on this, and it's working reasonably well. So I really like the way I had this ejecting mechanism working, and to load them in, I had a weird idea. So I thought if I injected the cannons from the middle of the wheel, I could use centrifugal force to pull them out to the outside and then load them. So to actually make that work, you can see here what I'm doing is building up some wood around the outside of this cannon, and once I do that, you can see as it rotates around, I'll have that cavity that cannons can fall right through to get to the outside. So finally here, I'm actually building up the tube that cannons are gonna get stored in, and these are somehow gonna get pulled forward, and then they're gonna get pushed outside. So with the tube looking good, I copied over the cannon and put it on the inside of this wheel just to see how it would do, and you can see here I'm able to eject one cannon, and then it's able to load the second one and then fling it out. And that actually looked fantastic. But this design wasn't perfect, because sometimes it would eject two cannons for seemingly no reason. Sometimes the first cannon would get ejected well, and then the second one would get somewhere stuck in the barrel. And I tried doing some things to improve the cannon's movement through this, and it seemed to help it from getting stuck. I never really had that problem, but sometimes the cannon just got loaded in the wrong way. And you'll see what I mean here. As it rotates around, the cannon's coming out with the front first, and this means that if it hits the outside, it's gonna get stuck and bind up the entire mechanism. And I tried a whole bunch of things to try to get the cannon's bias to go straight, but no matter what I did, it seemed like about half the time, it would come out face first and it wouldn't come out flat. So since this centrifugal loading design thing wasn't really working out that well, what I wanted to do instead was just simplify it a ton and have a single vacuum block on the bottom that sucks in a cannon, so that once the cannon is on the bottom, the sweeper will come around, pick up the cannon, and then throw it, and then the next one can get sucked right into place. Now, it seemed good, but when I tried this out, the vacuum block didn't really seem to be sucking in this cannon at all. In fact, you can see here the cannon seems to be pretty unaffected by it, and I realized if I just delete the block in front of the vacuum, it ends up sucking in the cannon just fine. It has a ton of power. So this actually looked pretty good, and what I wanted to do was build up a bit of a track with a few cannons in it and see how well it sucks in those cannons and makes this work. So starting out here, you can see putting in the first cannon, after that copying over the second and the third one, and to give it a test here, turn on the vacuum block, and you'll notice I have a block in front of it, but it shouldn't be affecting it anymore since I moved it slightly out of the way. And even here, you can see the back block does get pulled in, but I realized I'm gonna need it into 64 times suction before it even does anything at all. And I was trying to do this totally vanilla, and this vacuum was already like 32 times stronger than it should be, so I didn't really like this idea, and I had a new one instead that I thought was even better than that one. The plan is to have a conveyor belt that just keeps throwing cannons onto the system, and then the sweeper is going to come around and pick it up as it goes, and with this I should be able to continuously load the gun. So to get this chain thing to work, you see I have a couple wooden wheels on this beam, and after that you can see what I'm doing is putting down a couple of these armor blocks, and these armor blocks are actually going to make up the chain links. Now after I just let them go, you see that they fall really slowly, and I'm not in slow-mo or anything. The physics is just really weird for some reason. So I was a little concerned that was going to cause massive problems, but I did end up linking them together with a few more of those wooden blocks, and you can see here, it looks pretty good. After that, you can see I'm shrinking down this hinge, and basically the same purpose here. I'm going to use it to connect two links together and start making the chain. So that looking good, just moved it over where it needed to go. After I got it hooked up, added a second chain, and once I did that, they actually connected together just fine. And you can see here, the physics is still a little weird with them, but they are able to bend a little bit, and it should work out fine. Now, I made this really big, and you can see here, there's a lot of problems. I have chain links coming off on the bottom, the physics is just acting really weird with this, and the whole thing is just not that great. But I was thinking while I was making this, the wooden wheels might just work on their own without a chain. So you see I have a few of these put together, and as I spin them, they all spin together, and I could do the same for the other side as well. And I was thinking if I put a cannon in the middle of these, just like I'm doing now, maybe I'd be able to move it over to the other side. And that kind of worked and ended up falling off there. But otherwise, I am able to actually get this to move forward, and it has the advantage of automatically straightening out the cannon and keeping it from tilting to one side or the other, meaning it always gets loaded in correctly. It's actually good enough to get a cannon loaded up, and you can see here I'm able to shoot it, and overall, actually seems pretty good. So after that test, what I did is just add in a wall on the one side to keep the cannon from falling out, added it to the other side as well for the same reason, and once I did that, you see as I move this back and forth a ton, the cannon always stays pointing in the same direction, and that's really good, because that means it's always going to get loaded correctly. Now I also noticed my whole mechanism was actually off a little bit, so once I added in these 4 cannons here, I wanted to give it a test, but they all ended up falling off, because it's just slightly off. So after just moving it over to the side a bit, wanted to give it a test here, and you can see it actually works pretty well. I'm loading basically 1 cannon every time. So what I did is just opened up the top of this to have the cannons get ejected out, and you can see 3 of the cannons got launched really far, 1 of them ended up hitting, but the rest looked good. So what I wanted to do is add in a second sweeper, so it's able to grab 2 cannons every revolution. Once I did this, you can see here the speed that it ends up grabbing cannons at, it pretty cleanly grabs a cannon every time, so I was seems really hopeful. And to increase the amount of cannons that are getting loaded on here, I added on a second one of these conveyor belts on top of the first one, and after I did this, I was getting a lot of cannons thrown out. But this wasn't perfect, because the cannons on the top conveyor belt had to fall so far of a distance that they ended up often getting caught on something else, and it caused a lot of glitchiness. So I wasn't really happy with the second conveyor belt, but I wanted to keep it for now, just because I did need the extra throughput. So with the loading mechanism looking pretty good, next thing I wanted to do here is add on some wood, and these pieces of wood are going to hold on the flamethrowers. Now you see I'm putting on a whole bunch of flamethrowers, and it's because it takes a little bit of time for the cannons to fire. So if I have this many, the cannons are sure to pass through enough fire that they're going to shoot before they get to the exit. But it does end up igniting the conveyor belt, and that is a problem because it makes the cannons go off. So I need to be careful to position them far enough away from the flamethrowers that it's not really an issue. But you can see here as they get loaded in, as they pass through the fire, they do end up shooting, so this should work. So with that looking good, I did copy over both the top and the bottom conveyor belts for now, just to get some more cannons on here and see how well it would do. So I'm loading them on now, and you see, it is kind of doing well, but the cannons on top really are getting in the way and not really working out. So I ended up deleting all of that, but to get some more cannons on, what I wanted to do was just add on a big box that had a whole bunch of cannons in it. Now this seemed easy enough, because I just put this on here, and then the cannons will fall into the conveyor belt, and then they'll get dragged forward, and it should just work out fine. So after getting all those cannons in place, it looked good until the back ended up falling out, so I had to brace that, and once I had that done, you see here in this test, it is kind of working, but there's just way too many cannons. The conveyor belt is completely flooded right now, and it just cannot keep up. In fact, most of the cannons are getting kicked out to the sides and aren't even going out the top. So to limit the amount of cannons that are coming through here, what I did is added on 3 of these wooden blocks like this. Now once I did that, you can see here as I move the conveyor belt, it is able to move the cannons over it, and it limits the amount that can get through at any time, and this really solved that problem. Unfortunately though, it did cause another one, because cannons can get stuck in between the wheels and not move properly. So to fix that, I just added on a whole bunch more wheels like this. It actually looks pretty good, and they get loaded on one at a time at a pretty good rate, and most of them are getting passed through the fire. A few of them get kicked down. I'm gonna put down some more blocks to prevent that from happening, but for the most part, looks pretty good. I did have a small issue with this though, because they were kind of getting jammed in here, you can see. So to fix that, instead of just having a big box with a bunch of cannons, I wanted to tweak it a little bit so that I had 2 boxes with a really long stack of cannons instead, like this. And this prevents them from turning to one side or the other, and it pretty much entirely makes them go in one direction. And just to increase the capacity and the throughput a little bit, I'm just adding in a second one of these as well, and you can see I'm putting that in here. And once I had that done, you can see as I turn on the conveyor belt, they all get loaded on quite well. There's not a lot of them, so they ended up stopping pretty quickly, but for the most part, looks not half bad. I didn't have the fire turned on for this one, so you can see here if I hit C, it launches all the cannons at once, and they just go crazy. But here what I wanted to do is just give it a quick test once the cannons get loaded on, turning on the fire, and see how long it could go for. So it looked good at the start. It ended up loading on a bunch of cannons, but eventually here you can see the fire did run out. And this happens because I don't have infinite ammo turned on, and the flamethrowers have a limited amount of fuel in them. So to fix that problem, since I already had more flamethrowers than I needed, what I wanted to do is alternate each set of flamethrowers so that only half of them were on at a time. And this will basically give me double the fuel. And it's a little hard to see, but you can see it switching from the top flamethrower to the bottom one like this, and it's just gonna keep alternating like that until it runs out of fuel. So right now, just wanted to give it another test, load on some cannons, and see how it would do. So seemed pretty good. A bunch of cannonballs were getting launched out, and you see all the cannons are depleted before it ends up running out of fuel. Just has one last puff there, but there's no cannons left, so this design looks pretty good. And now finishing it up here, you can see I added on a whole bunch more wood just to make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Also added on some legs so it could be on the ground. But once I did that, you can see here a few final shots of it shooting. It's not stupidly fast or anything, but I think it's pretty good considering I'm using loose cannons and everything is entirely vanilla. And you can see here I get a pretty good spread as well. And now for here, it's probably my favorite shot. You can see as it moves around, it ends up picking up a cannon, bringing it through the fire, and ends up shooting, and it ejects it. And now for this final clip here, what I wanted to do is add on a whole bunch of these tents, add on 2 of these cannons next to each other, and see how well it would do. And it's actually kind of hard to see the cannonballs, and it's a lot easier to see all the cannons getting shot out from it. In fact, sometimes cannons get shot the wrong way, and I actually think they go further than the cannonballs do. I'm not sure why the game works like that, but whatever, it ends up destroying quite a few tanks. So guys, thanks for watching. This is definitely a fun video to make, wanted to make a weapon for a while, and I'm glad I made something that was kind of funny. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. Make sure to subscribe so you see more content like this, and otherwise, until next time.